Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Beckwith with the Climate Emergency Forum, and this interview is taking place live in Baku, Azerbaijan, for the COP28 conference, and it happens to be Saturday, November 16th, and we don't get the day off. We get tomorrow off. So I've got the pleasure of introducing Carlos Garcia, who's been doing an awful lot of work on methane in particular. So, Carlos, can you please introduce yourself and why are you at the COP? Is this your first one?
Thanks so much, Paul. And it's great to be here. Thanks so much. And yeah, we're rounding up the end of week one, so we're all very excited, all very tired. I think a lot of us are out of business cards, but we're really excited to kind of continue on the work and follow up with people we've met here. So this is now my fourth COP in a row. My very first one was in Glasgow. And I am the business development manager focused on methane markets for STX Group. So we're an environmental commodity trading firm based out of Amsterdam. And what is an environmental commodity? You can think of it as any positive environmental attribute in the reduction of methanes for any product that has a market design. So a REC, or in Europe they call it a guarantee of origin, a GU. In South America they call it an IREC, or energy efficiency tickets, or fuel efficiency tickets, emission allowance trading, anything that has to do with emission reductions and has a market, we trade, and we're one of the biggest traders. And so my work is really to help commoditize methane, because a market like that doesn't exist. So how can we make it easier and create a market for the reduction of methane to improve capital deployment flows, catalytic capital deployment for technologies that are just coming out, seed technologies that are really pushing the envelope for what could be done for the oil and gas, agriculture, waste sectors. So my job here is to essentially talk to policymakers to say, hey, this is a massive, massive portion of the greenhouse gas emissions, causing about half of all global warming that we see now. And there's no real market attention to how we can solve this. We have it for carbon markets, we have it for carbon and other short-lived climate pollutants, but methane, we don't. And it's a very easy, actionable lever that we can pull and stop the trend, at least in the near future.
So is this really, is there actually a methane market now? I mean, is this still a work in progress, like very early stages? So maybe you can tell us, when you think you can really get it going, basically, to make a difference.
So very similarly, and I think the Article 6 discussions, right, about creating a kind of global carbon market, I think is the first of its kind in that way, but now we just have to generally work with regional markets. So in the same way that each country or kind of region may pair together and have a regional carbon market, methane is a little different. So to date, there is no methane compliance or voluntary market. The way that methane works in some markets that allows it is that you can generate carbon credits that through the reduction of methane. And what they do is they translate it to CO2e equivalent, so carbon dioxide equivalent, and then you can sell into the voluntary carbon market. But as it stands now, there's not. But there's some really promising ideas coming out of India, out of the United States. You've also got something in the United Kingdom that's talking about commoditizing methane as well. And so the discussions are happening. People are seeing how can we include non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions into this market design and into this framework. And that's something that we're engaging in. So we also have, apart from creating a compliance market, there's a policy development that we're working on to help, if you're not familiar with it, there's a regulation in Europe called the EU Methane Regulation. Very similar to the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism for Europe, that says if you are importing natural gas, coal, or oil from anywhere outside of Europe, starting in 2027, you will have to verify and state your methane intensity emissions for the product. And starting in 2028, it will have to be below a certain intensity level. So as to say, if you are exporting, better said, if you are exporting to Europe, or for the importers, you're importing natural gas, coal, or oil, you have to be clean below a certain level. That's something that has been passed already, but what doesn't exist is a compliance tool and really a mechanism for how companies can do that. So us with a business and trade association in Europe called Eurogas, which represents some of the largest importers, exporters, even United States, natural gas exporters, infrastructure partners. We've created this compliance tool that essentially makes it easier for companies to be able to track the natural gas track where it originated, the intensity level of it, and so that way when they ship it to Europe and the importers take it, they can actually say, hey, Europe, this natural gas, this coal, this oil is below this certain intensity level, because right now there's not a system that exists for that. So that's something that we're leading. It's going to be, of course, international. The biggest exporters of natural gas, coal, and oil are America, Russia, Norway, Algeria, Qatar. So it's really transnational. I mean, we talk about energy security. Now we're talking about transnational security and sustainability. So the discussion's lively. Who we're talking to is exciting. Obviously, the concerns and the priorities are very different, right? The United States from Qatar, from Russia, and the European Union has their own priorities as well. So yeah, it's a very exciting time and a whole lot of things moving, but I think what we're seeing now is hopefully a lot of action, a lot of companies taking individual action and responsibility, individualized but specialized responsibility, and we're pushing forward. Yeah.
So one of the things I was wondering, and you've kind of preempted this question already, so are you using sensors on satellites to monitor point sources of methane? Because you can't just rely on a company saying we're emitting so much and we've changed. And the other thing is methane globally has been on the rise, and it's been attributed to increased wetland emissions, and everybody's worried about the wild card of the Arctic permafrost, the amount of methane in the top, say, meter of that. So are you able to distinguish between the anthropogenic emissions from companies and the natural emissions from the climate system because of the warming of the Arctic? And if so, do you have a feel for what percentage of the rise is from the anthropogenic components? Or if not, maybe that's something that you might want to figure out at some point, right?
Yeah, great question. And I think if I had the answer, I might start my own company and sell my data to a lot of people that are also interested in that answer. But I will say this. So yes, I think, I just recently read a report that between 2020 and 2022, which saw a massive increase in the rate of methane emissions. A lot of it was not anthropogenically caused. It was more wetland and microbial abundance more than the kind of usual, which is obviously a positive feedback loop and cycle of how that happens. But I would say we do know a good chunk of the emissions. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I was at a Chinese, I got invited to a Chinese summit on methane yesterday. Something like 27% of the methane emissions in China, which is the number 2, depending on who you ask, 1, 2, largest methane emitter in the world, 27% come from energy. 20% of the 27% come from coal mines. And the majority of it comes from abandoned coal mines. So when we say, where are the emissions? 100%, data matters. And that goes a little bit to their question of satellites. But we do know, and we do even know the top 7% of companies in China of those emitters are responsible for 70% of the emissions. So not only do we know the area, not only do we know the sector, not only do we know whether it's active or inactive portions of the sector, but we even know the companies within that sector. So in terms of, and that can only help us with policy and economic incentives, because without action items, right, the data is just going to sit there, and we're just going to have too much data, not knowing what to do with it. So we do have data. It's obviously getting better as more satellites are coming online. Gas spectrometry, handheld gas spectrometry meters are becoming more popular. And in terms of what that kind of looks like, yes, from a satellite, although generally access to that data is more tough to get to than you might imagine. But thankfully, the US EPA, I believe, and IMEO from the UN are making some of that open source. So you, I, or whomever's interested could look about where the emission sources from around the world are. But the issue, well, maybe not the issue, but one of the restrictions, one of the hard things with satellites is that they're really great at detecting methane emissions, but really big methane emissions. So when we talk about things from, let's say, oil and gas wells, or orphan wells or abandoned wells, you can't see that from a satellite unless it's a super emitter, which is generally kind of rare. Super emitters you might have with a massive gas leak that might have happened from a natural gas pipeline that's maybe active, potentially. Or more generally, you might see them in waste management, open landfills and pits in Afghanistan or India or America or Chile. So those you can see from the satellite, and for those super emitter events, the solutions are very different. What we are working more on is more localized and more specific. We are looking to demethanize and reduce the emission reductions in the oil and gas sector all throughout the value chain. So the emissions that we look at are more smaller, and those are handheld, drone, airplane. But yes, satellites are becoming incredibly important and more granular in the data they can detect.
Okay. Now, we've been talking mostly about the sources. Let's talk about the sinks a little bit. Now, I understand that hydroxyl is one of the biggest scavengers in the atmosphere to break down methane into CO2 and water, essentially. So if there's companies that come along with ideas to we talk about CDR, carbon dioxide removal. What about methane removal from the atmosphere, active methods? So if there's startups that start doing this and have interesting ideas, where would they fit into the scheme of the methane markets? Like, I would presume they would get some funding for what they do. If they break down methane, that's as good as not putting it up, almost. Not quite, but it's next best, I guess. So do they fit in? I mean, is that a consideration?
Yeah, great question. I think very similar to carbon dioxide removal devices, I would say it's a somewhat of a contentious or hot topic, let's say. I think for me, I am more of the mindset of, unless it's something that we have to have, let's say for now, in the near future, we have to have oil and natural gas, right? There is not a massive change in people switching from fossil fuel cars, combustion cars to electric vehicles, unfortunately, although it's picking up. But as of right now, the majority of people in the world run on gasoline. The majority of the energy in the world runs on natural gas, unfortunately. And we're pushing, right? So in the meantime, though, in that system that has to run, let's demethanize it, let's make it better. For things like carbon dioxide removal or methane removal, the way that I view it in this analogy that I've used many times is I see someone in this metaphor, I see someone in a room with a knife running around, and you can think that knife as climate change, cutting up, causing damages, sea level rise, heat, mortality issues, the air pollution, the list goes on. And I see that removal as kind of putting a Band-Aid on the issue, when really we should be stopping the person with a knife, right? So instead of saying, hey, you can continue to emit, we'll just be able to extract or break down the methane, let's go to the source and say, hey, you shouldn't be emitting any methane almost at all. Or let's talk about how we can reduce that. Now, if we can do both at the same time without taking money and funding for really critical technologies, renewable energy, the list kind of goes on, those really vital energy transition technologies and companies, if we cannot take funding from and money that's going to them and instead put it to this carbon removal or this methane removal technology and devices, I'm all for it. But if it's and/or, I think instead of putting a Band-Aid on the issue, let's stop the person running around with a knife, yeah.
Okay, so are you going to go scuba diving in the Caspian Sea? Of course, that's the problem with LinkedIn pages. People find out stuff about you before these interviews. I noticed that you're a PADI rescue diver. I'm also a scuba diver, and I actually looked into diving, where I would dive. There's some wrecks just off the coast.
What certification?
Not a rescue diver, but I go back well before PADI even originated. I'm the ACUC, which is Association of Canadian Underwater Council. So I've been diving since I was about 16, and I do it quite frequently. So are you active as a rescue diver?
So since 16, so that must have been like 20 years ago for you, somewhere around there?
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. My first scuba dive, I got my open water when I was 13, I believe, or 14, in Texas. So I wasn't in some, I think, you have to go do an open water test in open water. I think I did it in a pond or a lake in Texas where the visibility was about here and it was filled with catfish. So that was my first open water. I hope yours was a little bit better in Canada. No plans to do, unfortunately, in COP, and especially I think it was exacerbated in Dubai, where everybody was running around. But shockingly enough, won't be doing anything here. But in Dubai, I actually had the luxury of going to the deepest pool in the world, which is called Deep Dive Dubai, like 40-something meters. So I got it to do there. This week, it's been all work, almost no play. So unfortunately not. But I will be for Christmas heading to Belize. I'll be getting my dive master certification, and I'll be scuba diving in the Blue Hole, which if you're a scuba dive enthusiast, it should be on everybody's bucket list. But yeah.
That's great. My best experience diving was on the kelp beds off Catalina Island in California, and they're not there anymore. Unfortunately, they've all left. So the other thing really is, tell us a little bit about you went to Africa between high school and college, and you saw some of the tremendous poverty there, and you say on your LinkedIn that kind of directed you, and then eventually it directed you to think really hard about what you wanted to do to make a difference. And then you got interested, I guess through self-study of climate, mostly in the early 2000s, and then you thought, well, this is an area that's very important, complex, not enough people in it. So can you was there a particular incident or talk you saw or something that got you into the climate area? Because there's so many different things you could have done, right? But here you are in climate. So maybe tell us a little bit about that and about Africa.
I appreciate that, Paul. Also, I think you're maybe only the third publication ever to have asked me about my time going before college. So I appreciate that. I think, in between high school and college, my family's from Europe and Mexico, so we've done a lot of traveling. We've checked everywhere around the world that we can kind of go to, the kind of stereotypical Euro trip. And so I wanted to do something a little bit more impactful, something that I thought was going to be a better use of my time during the summer break. So I spent 2 months in Uganda and about 3 in Kenya. I did the very kind of stereotypical working at orphanages, helping build up schools. I sponsored a child back then, so for his education and living conditions. And I didn't really expect to have somewhat of epiphany. Going into college, my major was pre-law. That's what I want to do, not really focus on the environment. And when I saw the amount of not only desperate conditions, but just the lack of representation of these people who are the most kind, happy people who have nothing, little to nothing. I saw a bunch of kids digging a hole and then throwing rocks in it, very similar like bocce, and that was a game that would entertain them for hours. You go to America, you give a 10-year-old rocks in a hole, they're going to scream at you for an iPad, right? So the amount of happiness that I saw and these people who have nothing to do with climate change or serious emission rates throughout the world, for me, I said, holy moly, these people need a voice. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's a sector or it's an idea or a movement, but I want to figure out how I can get involved. And so from that moment, I then, to my mother's, I transferred majors a couple times. The next major that I took after that was photojournalism, because I said, wow, maybe one of the best ways to do this is to represent them visually and through media. I was not a good photographer. I was not a good writer. And shockingly, I know you know the movie from Al Gore and Inconvenient Truth. There's a response movie from, I don't want to say he's a climate denier, but at the time I didn't know, but he's a skeptic. He's called Bjorn Lomborn. Yeah. And he had a movie called Cool It, which was a response that said climate change is happening, but just not burning trees in 10 years. Yeah. And when I saw that, I said, holy moly. Like, not only is this the world's most pressing issue, but it's something that I didn't know about, a lot of people don't know about, and if they do know something about it, they probably have it wrong. So I want to be the foremost expert, not only in understanding this issue, but also helping to represent the people in Africa and around the world that are marginalized. And so that took me on a whole list of different jobs. I then worked at an environmental law firm in New York to help take down a nuclear power plant facility that was killing fish and ecological environments. Then I went to the Peace Corps in Peru, and then I worked for the Peruvian government. Then I worked for Harvard doing research. I've done as much as I can to get a best understanding of this space as I could. And the determination was, if you want to work on a local level and help people, you can do that and see the immediate effects. But if you want to help a lot of people, you have to go to policy and you have to go to market designs. And that eventually led to my understanding that business makes the world go round. Business is what's causing the emissions. Business is what's keeping the emissions going up. And business will be the reason why the emissions go down. And so that's the kind of precipice of how this started. My great-grandfather also owned a coal mine in Spain as well, so that's a nice full circle. We're helping to close the coal mines too. So it's a bit of a unique story, not one that I recommend anyone younger try to follow to try to find their path, try to find a more direct one. But for me, I've met a lot of amazing people, a lot of amazing companies, a lot of amazing ideas, a lot of not amazing people, but all kind of pushing hopefully towards a more decarbonized, equitable future.
Yeah, no, that's it's quite an amazing story, actually. And one thing, we're going to have to wrap it up in a minute. But one thing that sticks out that you said is that you lived amongst some of the poorest people in the world, and yet you're saying that these are some of the happiest people in the world, right? And this really shows that, our consumer society, it's accumulate, and we think that it will bring us happiness, and it's not. There's all kinds of societal problems. So, so how do you square? Like I've also noticed this. Some of the happiest people are the people with the least, and the lives are a bit maybe simpler, maybe they're not as cluttered, I don't know. I mean, do you have some insights into why you think these people were so happy? Is it because, they didn't know anything else, right? For one thing, this was their life. But are there others, as we finish up, are there other things? Because a lot of people are very unhappy now, especially in the U.S., if they're progressive, if they're worried about climate change, if they're worried about justice and fairness, and they just see chaos breaking out. So how can one stay happy if they're subject to chaos suddenly, I guess?
I will do this for the first time ever in an interview. I will quote a rapper: "More money, more problems." I think is the simplest way to do this, right? Biggie Smalls, I believe, said that, but don't quote me on that either. But I think that's right. So, I think, I'm going to put on my armchair psychologist hat here. But I think it's obviously comes down to the media and consumerism. I think, in America, we're taught that if you don't have the best iPhone, you're not cool. If you don't have the newest shoes, you're going to be picked on. If you don't have the newest style, and I think we're all susceptible to that to a degree, right? We all should care about, hopefully, how we present ourselves or how we interact with people and the level of respect that we give to them and how we present ourselves when meeting them or engaging with them. So to some degree, right, we're wearing suits because we want to do business. We want to tell people, hey, we're serious, we're being respectful. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if you wear a suit. If you have a good idea, if you have a good technology or invention or whatever, it shouldn't matter if you come in flip-flops or not. It doesn't matter. But I think some of the issue that we're having, and I think it's a cultural one, and I don't know how to stop this, right? Social media is such a massive giant. Consumerism is a beast that no one person, country can stop. But it's really about how do we engage with the current mentality of consumerism, of cool, of need, right? You need an iPhone. You don't want an iPhone. You need the iPhone to do business, right? How do we engage with the need culture and make it more sustainable? Or how do we engage with the need culture and say, maybe you need to think about if you really need this, right? Like just having that pause and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll skip 2 iPhones. Maybe I'll do that. Or maybe I'll, go buy vintage or reused clothes. Or maybe I'll go look at, refurbished furniture. One of my friends, he's a CEO of an amazing company called Reaply. They refurbish and reuse office furniture. And that's a massive, massive, massive emission cut in the United States. And so things like that, ideas like that, how do we work within the system until we completely blow up the system? How do we work within the system to make it better? How do we help people come to the idea that it's cool, okay, fun, economical to do this? Because until we do, the mindset and the ideology of consumerism will continue. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I've been chatting with Carlos Garcia, and we've gone from methane and markets to scuba diving in the Caspian Sea to happiness and consumerism. So I think we've covered quite a bit. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you, and I want to thank all our viewers for watching the Climate Emergency Forum, and I also want to thank the International Society for Ecological Economics for allowing us to get the badges to attend these COPs, and we're not quite regulars. I've been to 6 COPs myself. I started 10 years ago in Lima, Peru, so I guess I'm becoming a regular. So anyway, thanks again, and until next time, bye for now.